The girl kneeling at his father's grave was bleeding. Emeka Okafor stood frozen in Ikoyi Cemetery, rain hammering Lagos around him, watching something impossible. A young woman in a torn purple wrapper was scrubbing Chief Okafor's headstone with her bare hands. Blood dripped from her fingertips where the rough granite had cut her skin, but she didn't stop. She cleaned that grave like someone was holding a gun to her head. This made no sense. His father had died 5 years ago as one of Lagos's most hated men. Chief Okafor had crushed competitors, destroyed families, left behind more enemies than friends. Politicians still cursed his name. Business rivals had celebrated his funeral. Yet here was this starving stranger. She couldn't have been more than 20, thin from obvious hunger, caring for his grave with more devotion than his own son had ever shown. In 5 years, Emeka had visited exactly once. The day they buried the old man. His billions, his empire, his deals had always mattered more. But this girl, who looked like she hadn't eaten in days, was arranging wildflowers around the headstone. Flowers that probably cost her last naira. She hummed a Yoruba lullaby as she worked, completely absorbed in her task. There was something almost sacred about her devotion, something that made Emeka's chest tighten with shame he didn't want to feel. When he finally stepped forward, calling out gently, everything changed. The girl's head snapped up, and Emeka saw her face for the first time. Beautiful, with high cheekbones and large dark eyes that should have belonged to someone much older. Eyes that had seen too much pain for 20 years on Earth. But when those eyes met his, they filled with pure terror. Not surprise, not confusion. Terror. Raw, paralyzing fear that told him she knew exactly who he was. And somehow, knowing his identity meant she was about to die. "Excuse me, who are you?" Emeka asked, but his gentle tone only made her panic worse. The girl scrambled to her feet like a hunted animal. She knocked over her water bottle, dropped her cleaning cloth, and backed away from him, as if he was death itself walking toward her. "Wait, I just want to—" She ran, not the casual jog of someone avoiding an awkward conversation. This was the desperate sprint of someone running for their life. Her bare feet, already cut from Lagos streets, slipped on wet grass as she fled toward the cemetery gate. "Please!" Emeka chased after her, his expensive shoes sliding on muddy paths. "I just want to know who you are." She glanced back once as she reached the main road, and in that split second, Emeka saw something that would haunt him forever. This wasn't random fear. This girl believed that seeing him meant her death was coming. Then Victoria Island's evening traffic swallowed her whole. Danfos, Okadas, street vendors. She vanished into 20 million souls moving through Lagos like she had never existed. Emeka stood at the cemetery gate, breathing hard, staring at the chaos of traffic where she had disappeared. When he walked back to his father's grave, what he found made his blood run cold all over again. The headstone gleamed like new. Every weed had been pulled. The wildflowers were arranged in patterns that showed artistic skill. A small wooden cross sat at the head of the grave, obviously hand-carved with love. Someone had been visiting regularly. This wasn't her first time here. This starving girl had been showing his father's memory more devotion than his own blood had demonstrated in 5 years. As Lagos rain soaked through his $1,000 suit, questions crashed through Emeka's mind like bullets. Who was this girl? What connection could she possibly have to Chief Okafor? Why did she care for a dead man's grave better than his own son? And most terrifying of all, why had she looked at him like he was her executioner? Standing there in the storm, Emeka made a decision that would destroy his safe, wealthy world forever. He would find this mysterious girl, no matter what it cost. He would learn her secrets and why she feared him more than death itself. He had no idea that this decision would pull him into a war against Nigeria's most dangerous criminals. That the girl bleeding over his father's grave was the key to murders, political corruption, and stolen billions that reached the highest levels of power. The mystery that started with blood on granite would end with blood on his hands, and there would be no peace until he found her again. Emeka was not just rich, he was Lagos royalty. At 34, he owned half of Victoria Island, controlled 3 banks, had oil blocks in Rivers State, and owned the biggest construction company in West Africa. Presidents called him for advice. Governors begged for his support. When Emeka Okafor spoke, Nigeria listened, but this girl had shaken him to his core. Sleep became impossible that first night. Emeka paced his penthouse, staring out at the Lagos skyline. The girl's face haunted him, not just her beauty, but the genuine devotion she had shown his father's memory. By morning, his mind was made up. He summoned his assistant, Tunde, and set in motion the most extensive search Lagos had ever seen. Former DSS operatives combed the city. Private investigators questioned cemetery guards and flower sellers. Area boys searched every corner, motivated by rewards of 2 million naira. But the girl had vanished completely. He returned to the cemetery every day for 2 weeks. Rain or shine, he waited by his father's grave. Each morning, he abandoned board meetings to stand beside that headstone, hoping she would return. The grave told its own story. Fresh flowers appeared regularly, small stones arranged in artistic patterns. Someone was still maintaining this shrine with more care than he had ever shown his father. His business empire suffered. Board meetings became formalities. Partners noticed his distraction. The Lagos financial community whispered about Emeka Okafor's strange behavior. At night, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her face, the way she looked at him before running away. Something about her eyes seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. In his dreams, she tried to speak, but no words came. Then she would run, and he would chase her through endless cemetery paths. His personal assistant, Tunde, was worried. "Oga, you've been acting strange. What's wrong?" But how could Emeka explain that an unknown market girl had turned his world upside down? After 2 weeks with no results, his friend Kemi confronted him. They sat at Intercontinental Hotel, surrounded by Lagos elite, but Emeka barely noticed. "Your assistant told me you've spent 15 million naira looking for some random girl. That's not normal." The conversation planted dangerous seeds of doubt. What if the girl wasn't a stranger? What if her connection to Chief Okafor ran deeper? His father had been notorious for sleeping around Lagos. Women from every state had fallen under his spell. Could this girl be his half-sister? Could she be Emeka's blood, faithfully tending their father's grave while his legitimate son neglected it? The thought made him sick. If she was his sister, then the feelings stirring in his chest would be unthinkable. But he couldn't stop thinking about her face, the way her eyes had held his before terror took over. He couldn't stop wondering what she might have said if fear hadn't driven her away. Standing at his father's grave that evening, Emeka stared at fresh flowers someone had placed while he was away. The mystery girl was still out there, still caring for his father's memory, still hiding from whatever had terrified her. He made a silent promise. He would find her, no matter what it took. Something about this girl was different, special in a way that went beyond her connection to his father. But Emeka had no idea that fate was about to intervene. The girl he was searching for was closer than he thought, and their next meeting would change both their lives forever. 3 months later, on a rainy Thursday evening, Emeka found himself at the cemetery again. The search had consumed his life. 15 million naira spent, hundreds of investigators hired, every lead a dead end. But he couldn't stop coming back to this place. As he approached his father's grave, he stopped dead in his tracks. There she was. This time, she was planting flowers around the headstone, her hands dirty from the soil. White lilies arranged in careful patterns. She wore the same torn wrapper, the same broken slippers. But something was different. She looked thinner, more desperate. Her cheekbones stood out sharply, her wrapper hanging loose on her diminished frame. After months of searching, here she was. "Please don't run," Emeka said softly as he approached. The girl froze, then slowly stood up. This time she didn't run. Instead, she spoke in broken English. "I sorry, sir. I no mean to disturb your papa grave." "You're not disturbing anything," Emeka replied, his heart racing. "What's your name? Why do you come here?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "My name, Nakioma. Your papa. He was good man to me." The words shocked him. His father, good to someone? Chief Okafor had been ruthless, feared, yet this starving girl spoke of him with genuine affection. "How did you know my father?" Emeka pressed gently. "He helped me when nobody else would. He saved me from—" Before she could finish, shouting erupted from the cemetery entrance. 3 men in black suits were walking toward them, scanning the area like hunters tracking prey. They moved in formation, spreading out to cut off escape routes. Kioma's face went pale with terror. "They find me," she whispered. "I have to go." "Who are they?" Emeka demanded, but Kioma was already running. This time, Emeka was ready. He grabbed her hand. "I can protect you. Whatever you're running from, I can help." The men were getting closer. Kioma looked at Emeka with desperate eyes. "You no understand. If they catch me, they go kill me. These people, they already killed before." The words sent ice through his veins. This girl was running from killers. "Then we run together," Emeka said. "My car is right outside." They ran toward the cemetery exit, but as they reached the road, a black Jeep came roaring down the street. The driver wasn't trying to stop. He was aiming directly at Kioma. "Watch out!" Emeka shouted, pulling her toward his car. But the Jeep was too fast. It caught Kioma and sent her flying through the air like a broken doll. Her body hit the asphalt with a sickening sound. Emeka's heart stopped as he watched her hit the ground. Blood pooled around her head as she lay motionless on the wet road. The Jeep sped away into the Lagos traffic. Emeka dropped to his knees beside her broken body. She was breathing, but barely. Blood trickled from her forehead, and her arm lay at an unnatural angle. The girl who had cared for his father's grave was dying in his arms, and he was the only thing standing between her and the killers who had just tried to eliminate her. As sirens wailed in the distance, Emeka made a promise to the unconscious girl. He would save her life, no matter what it cost. And then he would find out who had tried to kill her and why. The mystery had become a matter of life and death. He scooped her into his arms and shouted at his driver, "Lagos University Teaching Hospital now! Drive like your life depends on it!" The Range Rover tore through Lagos traffic, sirens wailing as they raced against time. In the back seat, Emeka held Kioma's unconscious form, whispering prayers to a god he rarely acknowledged. At the hospital, Emeka paced the waiting room like a caged lion. His clothes were stained with her blood, but he didn't care. Hours crawled by while she fought for her life behind the operating room doors. After 3 hours, the doctor finally came out. "She's alive," the doctor said, and Emeka felt his knees go weak. "The surgery went well. We've repaired the internal bleeding." "Thank God," Emeka breathed. "When can I see her?" But the doctor's expression grew serious. "There's a problem. The head injury has caused severe memory loss. She doesn't remember anything. Not her name, not where she came from. Nothing." The words hit Emeka like a physical blow. Will her memory come back? We don't know. Sometimes memories return. Sometimes they never do. Right now, she's essentially a blank slate. Emeka stood in that hospital corridor, realizing everything had changed. The girl who knew secrets about his father, who was running from killers, she would remember none of it. All the answers he'd been searching for were now locked away in damaged brain tissue. But one thing became clear. She had cared for his father when no one else would. Now he would care for her, no matter what it took. When Kioma woke up 3 days later, she looked at Emeka with confused eyes. Who are you?" she whispered. "My name is Emeka. I'm the one who brought you here. You were in an accident." She stared at him blankly. "I can't remember anything. It's all dark in my head." Something inside Emeka's chest cracked open. This girl who had been taking care of his father's grave was now completely helpless, with no memory of her past or the danger she'd been running from. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I'll take care of you." He moved Kioma into his mansion in Banana Island, the most expensive estate in Nigeria. He hired the best memory specialists from London, brought in neurologists from America, and spared no expense trying to help her remember. But Kioma remained a blank slate. Days turned into weeks. Emeka found himself doing something he'd never done before, caring for another person. He bought her beautiful clothes, hired teachers to help her learn to read properly, and made sure she had everything she needed. She displayed intelligence that amazed everyone. Despite having no memory, she grasped complex concepts quickly. When Emeka discussed business, she asked insightful questions that revealed sophisticated understanding. Who had she been before the accident? Slowly, without realizing it, he was falling in love. It started with small things. The way she hummed while arranging flowers, how she treated every staff member with kindness, her habit of watching Lagos sunsets as if trying to remember something just beyond reach. She was falling in love with him too. He could see it in how she looked at him, the warmth in her voice when she said his name. One evening in his garden, Kioma turned to him with eyes full of feeling. "Emeka, I don't know who I was before, but I know who I am now. I'm someone who cares about you more than anything else." Standing there in the fading light, Emeka realized he had found something his billions couldn't buy: genuine love from someone who wanted nothing except his presence. But their happiness was about to be tested. The people who had tried to kill her were still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they finished what they started. One evening, Emeka's best friend Kemi confronted him over drinks at the Intercontinental Hotel. They sat in the VIP section, surrounded by Lagos elite, but Kemi's expression was serious as he studied his friend's face. "Emeka, what if this girl is not who you think she is? What if she's connected to you in a way you don't understand?" Emeka looked up from his whiskey, annoyed by the interruption to his thoughts about Kioma. "What do you mean?" "Think about it." Kemi leaned forward, his voice low. "Why was she at your father's grave? Why did those men want to kill her? What if she's your sister?" Emeka's blood went cold. The whiskey glass froze halfway to his lips as the words hit him like a physical blow. His father had been known to sleep around Lagos. It was possible he had children everywhere that nobody knew about. "Your father was Chief Okafor," Kemi continued, watching his friend's face pale. "That man had women from Kano to Calabar. This girl could be your half-sister, and you're falling in love with her." The thought that had been lurking in the back of Emeka's mind, the fear he had been trying to suppress, was now spoken aloud. His father had indeed been notorious for his appetites. Powerful men like Chief Okafor attracted women like magnets, and consequences were often ignored or covered up. "But she has no memory," Emeka said weakly. "She doesn't know who she is." "Exactly," Kemi pressed, "which makes this even more dangerous. What if her memory comes back and she discovers you've been close with your own sister? What if that's why those men were trying to kill her, to cover up some family secret?" Emeka's mind raced through the possibilities. The devotion Kioma had shown to his father's grave suddenly took on a sinister meaning. What if it wasn't gratitude from a stranger, but love from a daughter honoring her father? What if her terror when she saw him wasn't fear of a stranger, but recognition of a brother she had been forbidden to contact? "You need to find out the truth," Kemi said, "before this goes any further." That night, Emeka couldn't sleep. He paced his mansion while Kioma slept peacefully in her room, unaware of the storm raging in his mind. The thought haunted him like a curse. He was already in love with Kioma, but what if she was his blood? Every moment they had shared now felt potentially wrong. The way she looked at him with growing affection, the warmth in her voice when she said his name, the tender moment in the garden when she had declared her feelings. What if all of it was unknowingly incestuous? He thought about her face, trying to see resemblances to his father that he might have missed. Did she have Chief Okafor's eyes? Was her smile similar to his? The more he studied his memories of her, the more similarities he began to imagine. But then he remembered her intelligence, her sophisticated understanding of business and politics. If she was his sister, wouldn't she have grown up with privilege? Why had she been living on the streets, starving and desperate? Why had no one in his father's circle ever mentioned another child? The questions tormented him through the long Lagos night. By morning, he had made a decision that would either free him to love Kioma completely or destroy any chance of happiness between them. He would find out the truth about her identity, no matter what it cost, even if that truth broke both their hearts. Standing at his window, watching the sunrise over Lagos, Emeka knew that everything was about to change. The mystery that had started with a girl caring for his father's grave was about to reveal secrets that could either unite them forever or tear them apart in the most devastating way possible. The next few days would determine whether their love story would become a fairy tale or a tragedy that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Emeka decided he had to know the truth. The uncertainty was killing him, poisoning every moment he spent with Kioma. He couldn't continue living in this limbo, loving someone who might be his own blood. That night, while Kioma slept peacefully, he carefully collected several strands of her hair from her brush. His hands trembled as he placed them in a small envelope, along with his own hair sample. Tomorrow, he would have answers that would either free him to love her completely or destroy any chance of happiness between them. He took the samples to a private laboratory in Ikoyi that specialized in discrete genetic testing for Lagos elite. The facility had handled sensitive paternity cases for politicians and business leaders who needed absolute confidentiality. "I need complete discretion," he told the lab technician, a professional woman who had probably seen every kind of family secret imaginable. "No one can know about this test." "Of course, Mr. Okafor. We guarantee complete confidentiality. The results will be ready in 3 days." For 3 days, Emeka was a nervous wreck. He couldn't concentrate on business meetings, couldn't focus on the billion-naira deals that usually consumed his attention. His entire world had shrunk to the question of whether the woman he loved shared his blood. He watched Kioma through the security cameras as she moved around the house, learning to cook Nigerian dishes with the help of his staff, laughing at Nollywood movies on TV. She was innocent and pure, with no memory of whatever darkness had been chasing her. Her joy in simple pleasures was infectious. She found wonder in everything from cooking jollof rice to watching Lagos traffic from the balcony. Every time she smiled at him, his heart broke a little more. What if the test proved she was his sister? How could he live with these feelings that were growing stronger each day? The nights were torture. He would lie awake imagining two futures, one where Kioma was a stranger and they could love freely, another where she was his sister and he would have to walk away from the only woman who had ever truly touched his soul. During the day, he tried to act normal around her, but Kioma's intuition picked up on his tension. "Emeka, you seem worried," she said on the second day, touching his arm gently. "Is everything okay?" "Just business problems," he lied, hating himself for the deception. How could he explain that he was waiting to find out if loving her was wrong in the most fundamental way possible? The waiting was agony. Every hour felt like a day, every day like a week. Emeka found himself studying Kioma's face obsessively, looking for resemblances to his father that he might have missed. Did her laugh sound like Chief Okafor's? Were her hands shaped like his? But the more he watched her, the more he became convinced that any resemblance was coincidental. Kioma's nature was too gentle, too kind to be closely related to his ruthless father. Where Chief Okafor had been calculating and cold, she was warm and spontaneous. Still, biology didn't always follow personality. She could be his sister and still be completely different from their father. On the third day, his phone rang. The laboratory's number appeared on the screen, and Emeka's heart hammered against his ribs as he answered. "Mr. Okafor, this is Dr. Adebisi from the laboratory. Your test results are ready for pickup." "I'll be there immediately," Emeka said, his voice barely steady. The drive to Ikoyi felt like the longest journey of his life. Lagos traffic crawled with its usual sluggish pace, but every delay felt personal, as if the city itself was conspiring to prolong his agony. At the laboratory, Dr. Adebisi handed him a sealed envelope with the solemnity of a judge delivering a verdict. "The results are conclusive, Mr. Okafor. There can be no doubt about the findings." Emeka's hands shook as he took the envelope. Inside was either his freedom to love Kioma or the end of any chance of happiness with her. Standing in that sterile laboratory, holding the answer to the question that had tormented him for days, Emeka realized that his entire future hung in the balance. Whatever was written on that paper would determine whether he could return home to the woman he loved or whether he would have to find the strength to walk away from her forever. Emeka's hands shook as he opened the envelope at the lab. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Dr. Adebisi waited respectfully nearby, understanding that this moment would change a man's life forever. The scientific terminology filled the page: statistical probabilities, genetic markers, chromosomal analysis. But Emeka's eyes went directly to the conclusion printed in bold letters at the bottom. He read the results once, then again, then a third time, unable to believe what he was seeing. No biological relation. Probability of shared parentage, 0.00%. Kioma was not his sister. Relief flooded through him like water breaking through a dam. The crushing weight that had been pressing on his chest for days suddenly lifted, leaving him dizzy with euphoria. He could love her without guilt. She wasn't his blood. The feelings that had been tormenting him weren't forbidden or wrong. They were simply love, pure and uncomplicated. "Good news, I take it?" Dr. Adebisi asked with a knowing smile. "The best," Emeka managed, his voice barely steady. But as the initial relief faded, a new mystery took its place. If Kioma wasn't family, why had she been caring for his father's grave with such devotion? What connection could she possibly have to Chief Okafor that would drive her to honor his memory with such dedication? The questions could wait. Right now, all that mattered was that he was free to love the woman who had transformed his life. Emeka rushed home, his Range Rover weaving through Lagos traffic faster than usual. His driver glanced in the rearview mirror, noting his employer's obvious excitement, but wise enough not to comment. After days of watching Emeka struggle with some invisible burden, it was good to see him happy again. He had a plan. Tonight, he would tell Kioma about his feelings, not about the DNA test. She didn't need to know about his fears, but about how much he loved her. How she had changed him from a man who measured success only in money to someone who understood what really mattered in life. He found her in the garden, watering the flowers he'd planted specifically for her enjoyment. She wore a simple yellow dress that made her skin glow in the late afternoon sun. When she looked up and smiled at his approach, Emeka felt his heart skip. "Emeka, you look happy today," she said, setting down the watering can. "I am happy, because of you." He took her hands in his, feeling their warmth and softness. "Kioma, I need to tell you something. I'm in love with you." Her eyes widened with surprise, but not shock, as if part of her had been hoping to hear those words. "But I don't even know who I am. How can you love someone with no past?" "I love the person you are now," Emeka said, his voice filled with conviction. "The person I see every day. The kind woman who finds joy in small things, who treats my staff like family, who makes me want to be a better man." Chioma's eyes filled with tears that caught the golden light of the setting sun. "I love you too, Emeka. Even without my memories, I know that you saved me. You gave me a new life when I had nothing." "We gave each other new lives," he corrected gently. They kissed under the mango tree in his garden, surrounded by the flowers she had been tending and the beauty his wealth had created. But none of the luxury mattered compared to this moment. Emeka felt complete for the first time in his life, as if a piece of his soul that had been missing had finally clicked into place. When they separated, both were breathless. Kioma rested her forehead against his, and they stood in comfortable silence as the Lagos sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now we build a future together," Emeka replied. "Whatever secrets your past holds, whatever brought you to my father's grave, none of it matters as much as this moment." But even as they held each other in the gathering dusk, neither of them knew that fate was about to intervene in the most dramatic way possible. The past that Kioma couldn't remember was about to come crashing back into their lives, bringing with it truths that would test their newfound love in ways they couldn't imagine. The mystery girl from the cemetery was about to become someone else entirely, and their perfect moment of happiness was the calm before a storm that would change everything. 2 weeks later, Emeka took Chioma to his favorite restaurant, Sky Restaurant at Eco Hotel. The evening was perfect, Lagos glittering below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. He wanted to celebrate their love and maybe propose soon. The ring was already picked out, sitting in his safe at home, waiting for the right moment. They were seated at the best table, overlooking the Lagos skyline that Emeka had helped shape with his construction empire. Kioma wore a stunning blue dress he had chosen to match her eyes, and her smile was radiant as they studied the menu together. "Everything looks so good," she said, her English much improved after weeks of tutoring. "You choose for me." Emeka's heart swelled with love. This simple trust she showed him, the way she let him guide her through a world she was still rediscovering, touched him deeply. Soon, He would ask her to be his wife, and they would build a life together that transcended whatever secrets her past might hold. Their waiter approached, a young man who moved with the professional efficiency of someone accustomed to serving Lagos elite. He took their drink orders with practiced politeness, making small talk about the evening's specials, while Kayoma continued studying the menu with careful attention. But when the waiter looked directly at Kayoma to ask about her meal preference, everything changed in an instant that would shatter their perfect world. The young man's eyes widened with shock so profound it seemed to stop his heart. The notepad slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering to the floor as he stared at her like someone seeing a ghost rise from the grave. "Adaeze," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise. Kayoma's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Her entire body went rigid as something deep in her damaged mind shifted and cracked. The name echoed in her consciousness like a key turning in a long-locked door. "What did you just call her?" Emeka demanded, looking between the stunned waiter and Kayoma's suddenly pale face. The waiter stammered, realizing he had triggered something significant and potentially dangerous. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I know her. Her name is Adaeze Okonkwo. I used to work in her family's compound in Asokoro, Abuja. Her father was Senator Okonkwo." The words hit Emeka like lightning. Senator Okonkwo was one of the richest politicians in Nigeria, a man who owned half of Abuja and controlled political networks that reached from the National Assembly to the presidential villa. If this was true, then Kayoma wasn't just any random street girl. She was the daughter of one of Nigeria's most powerful families. But Kayoma, Adaeze, was gripping the edge of the table with white knuckles, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Color had drained from her face as memories began breaking through the barriers that trauma had built in her mind. The restaurant around them seemed to fade away as fragments of her past life reassembled themselves like pieces of a shattered mirror. Her father's face appeared first, Senator Okonkwo, a giant of Nigerian politics who had commanded respect throughout West Africa. Then their mansion in Asokoro, with its marble floors and sprawling gardens. "I remember," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as the floodgates of memory burst open. "Oh God, Emeka, I remember everything." The words came out in a rush, broken by sobs as years of buried memories crashed back into her consciousness. She remembered her father's love, his plans for her to inherit not just his wealth, but his political legacy. She remembered the stepmother who had hated her from the moment she entered their lives. Most painfully, she remembered the night everything changed. "My stepmother," she gasped, clutching Emeka's hand like a lifeline. She threw me out. After Papa died, she said I was cursed. She hired men to make sure I never came back." Emeka's mind raced as implications crashed over him like waves. The men in black suits at the cemetery weren't random criminals. They were professional killers hired by one of Nigeria's most powerful women. The hit-and-run accident hadn't been opportunistic violence. It was a calculated assassination attempt. "Your father being good to you," Emeka said slowly, pieces falling into place. "You weren't talking about my father. You were talking about yours." Adaeze shook her head, more memories surfacing. "No, both. Your father, Chief Okafor, was Papa's closest friend. When I was living on the streets, he found me. He took me in, tried to help me reclaim my inheritance. He was gathering evidence that Papa was murdered." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, with devastating clarity. "That's why they killed him," Emeka said, his voice hollow with realization. "My father was trying to expose your stepmother for murdering your father." Adaeze nodded through her tears. "The night he died, he showed me documents that proved Papa was poisoned. We were going to the authorities the next morning, but she found out. Her people came for me, and when your father tried to protect me." She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Emeka understood everything now. His father hadn't died of natural causes. He had been murdered by the same people who had tried to kill the woman he loved. Chief Okafor's final act had been one of heroism, dying to protect an innocent girl and the truth about political murder at the highest levels. As they sat in that elegant restaurant, surrounded by the wealth and power that defined Lagos elite, Both Emeka and Adaeze realized that their love story had become something much more dangerous. They weren't just two people who had found each other against impossible odds. They were the last witnesses to crimes that could bring down one of Nigeria's most powerful political dynasties. Mrs. Okonkwo had spent months believing her stepdaughter was dead, building her empire on that assumption. But now Adaeze was alive, her memories restored, and she had the love and resources of one of Nigeria's most powerful men supporting her quest for justice. The war that was about to begin would determine not just their future together, but whether truth could triumph over corruption in a country where money and political influence had always trumped justice. "My real name is Adaeze Okonkwo," she began, her voice shaking as the full weight of her recovered memories crashed down. The restaurant around them seemed to fade away as she spoke, her words carrying the pain of someone who had lived through unimaginable betrayal. "After my father died, my stepmother turned against me completely. She said I was cursed, that I brought bad luck to any man who looked at me. She claimed that Papa's death was my fault because I had stolen his love from her." Emeka listened, his heart breaking for the woman he loved. The elegant restaurant, the expensive meal, the ring waiting at home. None of it mattered now compared to the pain in her voice. "She threw me out of the house with nothing," Adaeze continued, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. "No money, no clothes except what I was wearing, no identification. She wanted me to disappear completely, to die on the streets like a forgotten beggar. I lived on the streets of Abuja for weeks, sleeping in doorways, begging for scraps of food. People looked at me like I was nothing, dirty, desperate, invisible. I thought I would die there, forgotten and alone. Until I found my way to Lagos. I was begging for food near National Theatre when your father found me." "My father?" Emeka's voice was barely a whisper. Chief Okafor had never mentioned helping anyone, had never shown the kind of compassion Adaeze was describing. "Chief Okafor saw me sleeping under the bridge. Instead of driving past like everyone else, he stopped his car and got out. He gave me money, food, and when he learned my story, he offered me a place to stay in his boys' quarters. He didn't ask for anything in return, he just helped me, because he could." The image shattered everything Emeka thought he knew about his father. The cold, ruthless businessman who had built an empire without caring who he crushed. This same man had rescued a stranger from the streets? Adeeze's tears fell faster now, as more memories surfaced. "For 6 months, your father treated me like his own daughter. He sent me to school to improve my education, bought me proper clothes, gave me hope when I had none. I had never experienced such kindness, especially from someone who had no reason to help me." Emeka felt his throat tighten with emotion he wasn't prepared for. This was a side of his father he'd never known existed. A man capable of selfless compassion hidden beneath years of business hardness. "He used to tell me stories about you," Adaeze said with a sad smile. "How proud he was of his son, who was building an empire at such a young age. He said you were too busy to visit, but he understood. Business was important, and he had taught you to prioritize success above everything else." The words cut deep. While his father was showing kindness to a stranger, his own son had been too busy making money to visit, too focused on surpassing the old man's achievements to see the person behind the reputation. "What happened to him?" Emeka asked, though he dreaded the answer. "My stepmother found out where I was," Adaeze said, her voice breaking. "She has spies everywhere, people who report back to her about anything unusual. When she learned that Chief Okafor was protecting me, she sent her thugs to bring me back to Abuja. Your father tried to protect me. When they broke into his compound that night, he stood between them and me. He told them I was under his protection, that they would have to go through him to take me." Daisy closed her eyes, reliving that terrible night. "They pushed him down the stairs of his house. He hit his head on the marble floor and there was so much blood. He tried to speak, to tell me to run, but the words wouldn't come." Emeka's world tilted on its axis. His father hadn't died of a heart attack like the doctors claimed, like the death certificate stated. He'd been murdered trying to protect this girl, killed by thugs working for one of Nigeria's most powerful women. "I tried to call for help," Adaeze continued, But they threatened to kill me if I said anything. They told everyone it was an accident, that he had fallen down the stairs during a heart attack. The investigation was closed before it even began. Then they dragged me back to Abuja and locked me in a room for months. My stepmother wanted me to suffer, to regret ever crossing her. She said I would stay there until I learned my place or died, whichever came first. "How did you escape?" Emeka asked, amazed that she had survived such cruelty. I waited until she traveled to London for her birthday party, a month-long celebration that she throws for herself every year. The guards got careless, and I managed to break the window lock. I came straight back to Lagos because I had made a promise. Adaeze looked directly into Emeka's eyes. "I had promised your father that I would never forget his kindness. So I went to his grave to keep it clean, to honor the man who saved my life when no one else would." The devotion she had shown, the bleeding hands, the careful arrangement of flowers, it all made perfect sense now. She hadn't been a stranger caring for his father's grave out of random kindness. She had been a daughter figure honoring the memory of the man who had treated her with more love than her own family ever had. Emeka was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. His father, the man he'd thought was cold and heartless, had died protecting an innocent girl. And that girl had been faithfully tending his grave ever since, showing his memory more devotion than his own son had managed. "Emeka," Adaeze said quietly, her voice filled with fear. "My stepmother is Senator Okonkwo's wife now. She controls his entire empire since he died. Oil blocks worth billions, political networks that reach from Abuja to London. If she finds out I'm alive, she'll finish what she started. She's one of the most powerful women in Nigeria." Emeka looked into her eyes and saw fear, but also trust. She was trusting him with her life, believing that his love and resources could protect her from forces that had already killed twice to keep their secrets buried. "Then we're going to end this," he said firmly, taking her hands across the table. "She killed my father and tried to kill you. She's stolen your inheritance and built her empire on murder. It's time she faced justice." As they sat in that elegant restaurant, surrounded by the trappings of Lagos wealth and power, both Emeka and Adaeze understood that they were about to declare war on one of Nigeria's most dangerous women. The love that had brought them together was about to be tested in the most violent way possible, but they also knew they had no choice. Justice demanded that the truth be told, that Chief Okafor's murder be avenged, and that Senator Okonkwo's real killer face consequences for her crimes. The battle for their lives and their love was about to begin. Within 48 hours, Emeka had mobilized his network. He hired former military officers, investigative journalists, and forensic accountants. They dug into every corner of Senator Okonkwo's widow's life. What they found was darker than anyone expected. Mrs. Okonkwo wasn't just Adaeze's stepmother, she was her biological aunt. Adaeze's real mother had been Mrs. Okonkwo's younger sister, the family favorite who was set to inherit everything until she died in childbirth. Mrs. Okonkwo had married Senator Okonkwo specifically to get control of the inheritance that should have gone to Adaeze. For years, she'd been systematically stealing money that legally belonged to her niece. Bank records showed billions of naira transferred to shell companies and offshore accounts. The scale of theft was staggering. Adaeze should have been one of Nigeria's richest young women, but her aunt had stolen everything to build her own empire. But the evidence that broke the case wide open came from an unexpected source. One of Mrs. Okonkwo's former drivers, a man named Yakubu, came forward with recordings. He had been secretly recording his boss for years, hoping to protect himself from her violent temper. "She is a devil," he told Emeka's investigators, his hands shaking. "I have seen things that would make your blood freeze." In the recordings, Mrs. Okonkwo could be heard clearly planning Chief Okafor's murder and ordering hitmen to kill Adaeze. "That old fool thinks he can threaten me," her voice crackled through the speakers. "We'll make it look like a heart attack, push him down those marble stairs, and let gravity do the rest." Even more damning were her orders about Adaeze. "If that girl ever comes back to claim what's hers, I'll finish her myself." Her voice continued with casual cruelty. "I've worked too hard to let some village girl destroy everything I've built." The recordings revealed a criminal enterprise that included assassination teams, drug trafficking, and money laundering. She had killed dozens of people who threatened her power: journalists, judges, politicians who refused her bribes. Most chilling was her complete lack of remorse. She spoke of murder as a business tool, of human life as something to eliminate when convenient. As the evidence compiled, the scope of Mrs. Okonkwo's crimes became clear. They weren't just seeking justice for 2 murders. They were taking on one of West Africa's most dangerous criminal organizations. But they had something she didn't expect: unlimited resources, international connections, and most importantly, a witness she thought was dead. The war was about to begin, and only one side could survive. The evidence was overwhelming. Emeka's team had built a case so airtight that even Nigeria's corrupt justice system couldn't ignore it. The recordings, financial documents, and witness testimonies created an unbreakable chain of proof that led directly to Mrs. Okonkwo's door. Within a week, federal agents surrounded her mansion in Asokoro. EFCC operatives, backed by military units, moved in coordinated strikes that prevented any possibility of escape. The woman who had commanded fear throughout Nigeria's political establishment was led away in handcuffs, while television cameras broadcast her humiliation to the entire nation. Her arrest sent shockwaves through Abusha's corridors of power. Politicians who had taken her bribes scrambled to distance themselves. Business associates who had profited from her criminal enterprise suddenly discovered urgent reasons to travel abroad. The network of corruption that had protected her for years crumbled as everyone rushed to save themselves. International news picked up the story. Here was proof that even Nigeria's most powerful figures could face justice when their crimes were exposed. Interpol froze her offshore accounts. European banks seized assets linked to her money laundering operations. The criminal empire she had built over decades collapsed within days. The trial was quick and decisive. Mrs. Okonkwo's lawyers, some of Nigeria's most expensive legal minds, found themselves helpless against evidence that couldn't be challenged or dismissed. The recordings of her planning murders were clear and undeniable. The financial records showing systematic theft stretched back for years. Witnesses who had been too terrified to speak before now came forward under federal protection. Day after day, the courtroom heard testimony that painted Mrs. Okonkwo as one of Nigeria's most dangerous criminals. Former employees described her casual orders for violence. Forensic accountants traced billions of stolen naira through shell companies and offshore accounts. Medical experts confirmed that both Senator Okonkwo and Chief Okafor had been murdered, their deaths disguised as accidents. Emeka and Adayaze attended every session, sitting in the front row where Mrs. Okonkwo could see them. The woman who had tried to erase Adayaze from existence now had to watch as her victim testified about crimes that would destroy her forever. When Adayaze took the witness stand, her testimony was devastating. She spoke with quiet dignity about her father's murder, her aunt's cruelty, and Chief Okafor's sacrifice. Her words carried the weight of someone who had survived unimaginable trauma, but refused to be broken by it. "She killed my father for his money," Adayaze said, looking directly at Mrs. Okonkwo. "She murdered Chief Okafor because he tried to expose the truth. She tried to kill me because I was inconvenient to her plans. But evil doesn't win forever." As the judge read the verdict, life imprisonment without possibility of parole, Mrs. Okonkwo turned to look at Adayaze in the courtroom. Her face twisted with hatred that had consumed her for decades. "You should have stayed dead like your mother," she spat, her voice carrying venom that chilled everyone who heard it. But Adayaze stood tall, her hand firmly in Emeka's. No longer the terrified girl who had run through cemeteries in fear. "I survived because God had a plan. And now, justice has been served." The courtroom erupted in applause as Mrs. Okonkwo was led away in chains. For the first time in decades, a powerful Nigerian politician had faced real consequences for their crimes. The message was clear to anyone who might consider following her example. With Mrs. Okonkwo in prison, all of Senator Okonkwo's assets legally reverted to Adayaze as his only surviving child. Overnight, she went from a homeless orphan to one of the richest women in Nigeria. Oil blocks worth billions, real estate empires, political networks that had influenced elections. Everything that had been stolen from her was finally returned. But more important than the wealth was the vindication. Chief Okafor's murder had been avenged. Senator Okonkwo's killer was behind bars. The truth that had been buried under corruption and violence was finally exposed to the light. As they left the courthouse together, Emeka and Adaize knew that justice had been served. The love that had brought them together had survived its ultimate test. They had faced down one of Nigeria's most dangerous criminals and emerged victorious. The mystery that had started with a girl cleaning a grave had ended with the triumph of love over evil, truth over corruption, and justice over power. But their story was far from over. Now they had the resources and influence to change Nigeria for the better, to ensure that what happened to them could never happen to anyone else. The billionaire and the market girl had become symbols of hope for a country that had almost forgotten what justice looked like. 3 months later, Emeka led Adaize to a very special place, his father's grave in Ikoyi Cemetery. The woman who had once knelt here as a starving stranger now walked beside him as one of Nigeria's most powerful heiresses. But this time, the grave looked different. It was surrounded by beautiful flowers, with a new headstone that read, Chief Emeka Okafor Sr., a man who died protecting others. "This is where our story began," Emeka said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is where I first saw you showing love to my father when I had failed to do so myself. You taught me what real loyalty looks like." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The place that had once represented mystery and fear had become sacred ground, where love had taken root. Emeka went down on one knee beside his father's grave. He pulled out a ring that sparkled in the afternoon Lagos sun, sending rainbows of light across the flowers. "Adaize, you saved my father's memory, and you saved my heart," he said, looking into eyes that once held terror, but now sparkled with love. "You turned a cold businessman into someone who understands what really matters." "Will you marry me?" Emeka asked. "Will you be my wife, my partner, my heart for the rest of our lives?" Through happy tears, she whispered, "Yes, Emeka, 1,000 times yes." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger. As they embraced beside his father's grave, surrounded by flowers and golden sunlight, Emeka felt his father's spirit at peace. The man who had died protecting an innocent girl had somehow brought his son the greatest love of his life. Chief Okafor's final act of heroism had created a chain of events that led to justice, redemption, and a love story that would be told for generations. As they kissed in the shadow of the headstone, Emeka understood that some stories have perfect endings. The mystery that began with a girl cleaning a stranger's grave had become a love that would last forever. The cemetery that had once been a place of neglect had been transformed into sacred ground where their future together began. Their love had been blessed by the spirit of the man who made it all possible. The billionaire and the market girl had found their fairy tale ending in the last place anyone would expect: a cemetery where love had conquered death, and justice had finally been served.